Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am your host. I am your lone host, which is weird coming off an episode last week where we had four guys on the show. Today we've got just me. We're coming to you at a week between Christmas and New Year's, which made me think it was better just go solo. I'll give Brian and Greg Zumak and Brendan Miller give those guys a week off to enjoy time with family and friends. Today, I'm doing something a little bit unique where I am going to run through and just give brief prospect notes on as many prospects as possible. It's going to be something I have not done that before on this show. Whether it's this show or the previous show I did, I've never kind of gone through and just tried to fit in as notes on as many guys as humanly possible. But we're going to do that today. So obviously, I'll have more notes on guys like Matt Shaw and Owen Casey than I will on guys towards the back end of this list, like Luis Rujano or Ed Howard or whoever it might be. But I may have a little bit more on Ed Howard, considering his status in the system. But I'm gonna go over as many guys as humanly possible. Again, I'm gonna shoot for a 60-minute episode like I typically do. Maybe we'll get to 60 guys. Maybe we'll get to more. Maybe we'll get to fewer. We'll see. But I have a whole bunch of them lined up here. But before we get into that, I have to mention I'm recording this today on December 29th. It is Sunday afternoon, and the Matt Mervis trade just happened. So I figured that this is actually a really good opportunity to talk about Matt Mervis and kind of talk about the trade that just happened. The Cubs sent Matt Mervis, according to a report from our guy RM Layton over at the Just Baseball Show and the Call Up Pod. RM Layton reported the Cubs sent over Matt Mervis to the Miami Marlins for another former top 100 prospect, and that is Vidal Brujan. And so I guess we'll hit a little bit on Vidal Brujan. He's a utility player, plays infield and outfield. He kind of fits into a mix of the mix of Miles Mastrobuoni and Ben Cowles and Luis Vasquez and now Gage Workman that are in this system as of right now. Whether he holds a spot on the Cubs 40-man roster throughout the offseason and into next year, that's up for debate. We'll have to see. I can't imagine that all five of those guys will hold a 40-man roster spot throughout the entire offseason. But that's all I really have on Vidal Brujan. Like I said, former top 100 prospect. He spent time last year with Miami. He spent time coming up through the system in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, but he is now a Chicago Cub. On the other end of the spectrum, I can speak a little bit more on Matt Mervis, who his time as a Cub is complete, and what a wild ride it has been for Matt Mervis. At the time of the trade, he was my 37th ranked prospect in the Cubs organization. He dropped pretty far from where he once was. He peaked actually on my list, on my prospect rankings. At one time, he was all the way up at number 11 on my prospect rankings, which believe that was in the mid-season 2023 update. So June of 2023, I updated that and had Matt Mervis at 11. I think on other updates, on either side, both right before and right after that, I had him at 12. I had him at 14. I think I had him at 17 on one. So he was pretty consistently in that 11 to the time he was traded 37 range. And I was a guy that was pretty typically low on Matt Mervis compared to everybody else. I know that other people had him as top 100 prospects. I know he made his way into a top 100 prospect ranking for a national publication. I believe it was for MLB Pipeline, but I could be wrong on that. But I never had him as a top 100 prospect in all of baseball. You guys know out there listening how careful I am at ranking prospects I view as first base prospects or DH prospects, and how I need them to hit. But there's no denying what Matt Mervis did in the farm system during that 2022 and 2023 run was downright remarkable. Really, it brought so much joy to me and other people that follow the Cubs minor league system just because of how dominant he was during his rise up to the system. Whether that was during his crazy rise up from high A to Double A and to Triple A into one season, or just dominating the AAA level like he did in 2023. Matt Mervis was really impressive statistically during his time in the Cubs system. Really, what Matt Mervis does extraordinarily well is pull the ball in the air. He posts pretty decent exit velocity numbers, but really where his bread and butter is just pulling the ball in the air and showing power in that way. Maybe better than any prospect I've seen at that specific skill during my decade covering the Cubs farm system. Really, really good at that. Now, he didn't really get it. The Cubs didn't really show faith in Matt Mervis in the way that I think that a lot of Cubs fans did. The Cubs obviously allowed him to debut in Chicago in 2023. We thought we would see a debut from him in 2022. Obviously, they did not give that to him, but they gave him the debut in 2023. They gave him a little bit of run there at first base for a little bit, but really struggled during his brief stint in Chicago. Wasn't really given. I mean, he was given some time, but not nearly enough to get settled in at the big league level. So 2023, he ended up being sitting back down in the minors. Continued to kill it during his time in the minors in 2023, and then got a little cup of coffee again in 2024 in Chicago, where he struggled again. So I think what Matt Mervis needs is the opportunity to start on a daily basis over at first base, and I know that the Miami Marlins are that opportunity for him. I think that there's still a great chance that Matt Mervis can kill it at the major league level. I think that he can be a strong starting caliber player in the big leagues, and I think that he needs a long run. He needs a season-long run to prove that he can or cannot do it. And I think the Miami Marlins are that team for him. So really excited to see what Matt Mervis, Mash Mervis does in Miami. I know that those fans should love him, the way he goes about his business. And he was one of my favorite covers in the minor league system. Speaking of a favorite cover in the minor league system, I do want to point out one quick thing, and that is that two of our favorites here on the show and me personally have signed minor league deals with other teams. Typically, we wouldn't cover this, but I feel like these two guys were players that I covered pretty extensively when I started. I've been covering Cubs prospects for, like I said, about a decade or so, but I started getting into the podcasting game right as these guys were drafted, right around the time that these guys were drafted. And so Brennen Davis and Cole Roederer have both signed with other organizations on minor league deals. Cole Roederer with the San Diego Padres. I know that Cole was I believe, 2-time, maybe 3-time guest on my show. One of the most entertaining dudes to ever cover. One of the best guys to have on the show. I know that there's a lot of Cubs fans out there that cheered really hard for Cole Roederer. Very crazy time during his professional career in the Cubs organization, between the injuries, the call up, the lack of playing time, and the playing time that he got and killing it there. Like, just a lot of just craziness for Cole Roederer during his time in the system. Still one of the more talented players that I've seen, and really excited to see him go back closer to home out in California. The California kid returns back home. Hopefully that he gets a decent amount of run in AAA for that San Diego Padres organization, forcing his way up to the major leagues. Brennen Davis is the other guy who signed a minor league contract with the New York Yankees. He, unlike Cole Roederer, was on the 40-man roster for a couple of years there for the Cubs. The Cubs then DFA'd him, made him a free agent this past about a month and a half ago is when they did that, during all the 40-man roster crunch. So he is signed with the New York Yankees. You guys have heard me wax poetically about Brennen Davis for a long, long time now on the show, on your podcasting airwaves. Talked about his insane abilities from the moment he was drafted. I was there present at his first career professional full season home run when he was playing over in Dayton. I got the chance to interview him there. That was, I think Brennen Davis he very well could have been my very first interview of any player, podcast or not. And just a great dude. And there was a reason why he was the top prospect in the Cubs organization for several years, even through some of his injuries. Injuries are really what came back to bite Brennen Davis, but just an ultra talented guy, a guy that I think can still regain some athleticism and absolutely kill it with the New York Yankees. But he was a guy that I watched again. You guys know this as longtime listeners of the show, but I watched him take batting practice in Dayton back in the day, I believe that was 2019, it would have been. And the batting practice just sounded different from Brennen Davis, and it just sounded like a big league caliber player. So ultimately what I ended up doing was grabbing screen clips from every single minor league home run that Brennen Davis hit during his time in the Cubs system that was on television. So that's all the full season home runs he hit, minus a few of the Arizona Complex League home runs that he hits, plus a few of a couple home runs from the Futures game back in, I believe that was 2021 season, when he had the 2 home run game in the Futures game. So you guys can go watch that over on the Northside Bound YouTube page. I've got a clip, believe it's like a 9.5-minute video of all of Brennen Davis's home runs. So if you want to reminisce on the good times of Brennen Davis, you can go check that out. It's super, super fun. I enjoyed doing that over the last 5 seasons. That was 5 seasons worth of work. I was hoping to post that. I was hoping for that to be a video that I posted as he made his major league debut with the Chicago Cubs. Obviously, that is not going to be the case, but we can still enjoy a few Brennen Davis home runs. So I just wanted to give shout outs to all 3 of those guys who have been a blast to cover in the minor leagues for the Cubs over the past few years. And let's go ahead and with that, let's get into some prospect notes for players. What I'm going to do is I'm just going off my prospect list for the most part. I'm just going to run through. I have I'll mention the players so you guys can keep track of all these names and all of this information I'm throwing at you on podcast and on YouTube form. I'll use their names as much as I possibly can. Their names will be posted on the screen for those of you guys watching on YouTube. But my plan is just to basically go through my prospect rankings, 1 through 40. I'll start with that for the most part, and then tacking a few guys here and there, and then just go off of what would generally be my prospect rankings after 40. But after I get through 40, it gets a little hairy. I guess it's not going to be specific, like where guy ranked number 43 is the 43rd ranked guy versus the guy who's 51 is like absolutely 51. Like that's going to be the case for those guys, but it's worth pointing out information about him. Like I said, I'll have way more information about Matt Shaw than I will maybe the 55th guy I talk about here today, but maybe those guys will just have a sentence or 2 max. But it'll be fun for you guys to hear a little bit about these players in the heart of the offseason, right? We are about smack dab between the World Series and opening day in 2025. And so this is a good way to kind of take stock of who is in the Cubs farm system and what prospects are there and what to kind of expect. I'll do my very best to give some information about where I expect each of them to play in 2025. So that gives you a little bit of context going into my notes on each player. So without further ado, let's start off with Matt Shaw. Matt Shaw is my top prospect in the Cubs farm system. He is he will spend most of the year, if not all of it, in Chicago next year. Right now, he's slated to be the starting third baseman for the Chicago Cubs. He will be a big leaguer in 2025. I think he is ready to do that. Matt Shaw has a really good hit tool, has a very underrated power tool. We talked about him quite a bit on the last podcast with all 4 of us on the show. His ability to draw walks better than I expected him to, while also limiting strikeouts, is really, really impressive. I think he's an all-around baseball player, and really what impresses me the most about Matt Shaw is just like that baseball rat mentality that he brings to the field. Like coaches love coaching this player. Matt Shaw is a baseball player at heart, and you can see that as soon as he takes the field. So my biggest concern, obviously, with Matt Shaw is his defense, and we had a full blown conversation about that on last show on Matt Shaw's defense at third base specifically, but across the diamond, I think that there's question marks about what Matt Shaw can be defensively. But where I am a little bit more positive is that, like, I think that he's going to find ways to get the job done. I don't think he's ever going to be a outwardly bad defender anywhere where you put him. There's going to be question marks, I think, wherever you put him. But I think because of his grittiness and his toughness and his ability to go out there and get the job done, that he may be a below average defender at third base or second base or left field or wherever he ends up playing. But I don't think he's going to look ridiculous at any of those positions. So Matt Shaw, there's a reason why he's a top prospect in the system. There's a reason why he's consensus top prospect in the Cubs farm system. He's going to be really fun to watch in Chicago next year. Next guy up is Owen Casey, who was another guy. One of those, there's a whole host of guys here at the top that are AAA players, AAA prospects, young guys that are just about ready for Chicago. Where Owen Casey fits is confusing, right? I know that the Cubs major league outfield is pretty stock full. And so Owen Casey just falls into a situation where as soon as there's an injury, I think that he jumps into the mix. I think that if it's a short-term injury, if it's a guy who's out for a few days, or a guy who's going to hit the 10-day IL and only spend those 10 days on the IL, it may not be Owen Casey in 2025 for that circumstance. Because I think in that circumstance, you have a guy like Alexander Canario, you have somebody else who can kind of fill in for a few days. If you're bringing up Owen Casey, I think that you want to ease him into things and give him a chance to have a few weeks worth of play. So, for example, if Kyle Tucker or Seiya Suzuki or Ian Happ go out and get injured for they pull a hamstring and they're out for a couple months. And I think that Owen Casey's your guy in Chicago. I think that he comes up and he gets a significant amount of playing time. It's going to be interesting to watch Owen Casey. I think that like I've gone on and on about his ability to continue to improve, but also not put everything together at the same time. I think that this is the year that he does that in AAA, and once he does that, I think he's ready to roll in Chicago. It's going to be interesting with the swing and miss for Owen Casey, the swing and miss especially in the zone, the swing and miss with changeups from right-handed pitchers. But it's going to be a fun power profile, especially if he learns how to tap into that pull side power even more than he has in the past couple of years. So Owen Casey, fun to watch, fun player to watch in general. So a lot of love to Owen Casey. Cade Horton, former number one prospect as of last year. I've got him down at number 3 right now in my farm system rankings. But right now, Cade Horton's kind of in a weird situation, right? Where like he's going to enter 2025. He will spend probably, I guess, most of the season in Iowa. But I'm curious to see how many innings he actually gets during his time between Iowa and Chicago this full season in 2025. It's kind of a situation with Cade Horton where is he relieving? Is he starting? Does he start off the year in Iowa as a starter? And then when he's ready for his call up to Chicago, then he's a reliever from there on out. Is he a reliever the entire year? I kind of envision him being a reliever the entire year, just to really limit those number of innings. So he's and a multi-inning reliever, so he's around 60 to 80 innings, as opposed to going up to like 100 to 120 innings pitched on the mound between starting and relieving. So that's the thing to watch with Cade Horton this year is just how they utilize those innings. Where is he using those between Iowa and Chicago, and where is he using those innings between the bullpen and the rotation? So that's worth keeping an eye on for Cade Horton. All right, next up is Moises Ballesteros, who is maybe the favorite prospect of most fans in this organization. I think that like there's plenty of reasons to love Moises Ballesteros, between the beautiful swing that he has, and officially now that Cole Roederer is officially out of the Cubs farm system, Moises Ballesteros takes over that role as the most beautiful swing in the Cubs farm system. So I think if we're watching something with Moises Ballesteros this year, it's that how much do the Cubs feel like they need his bats, versus how much do the Cubs feel like they need him to improve as a catcher, right? So if they just want him to ride they love his bat so much that they're like, we can't not have Moises Ballesteros' bat in the lineup in Chicago. They're going to call him up and say, screw it to his defense. Like he can keep working on that on the side, but like it's an emphasis on his bats. On the other end, if they feel like they can let that bat ride out in AAA, it's like, hey, you're putting up a 900 OPS in AAA. You can keep doing that, but we just need you to focus on your defense. That's probably going to be telling based on how the major league team performs. If they don't need his bat desperately, then they'll allow him to get more reps in behind the plate and down there in AAA in Iowa. And so that's going to be super interesting to watch. I think there are plenty of at bats in Moises Ballesteros' future in Chicago in 2025. I think that like I wouldn't be surprised if he is up in May and spends the entire year in Chicago. I would also not be surprised if he's like a September call up and he just gets that month's worth of at bats in Chicago. So a wide range of outcomes in 2025 for Moises Ballesteros this year. Kevin Alcantara is my next guy. Kevin Alcantara made his MLB debut, obviously, last year in 2024. I think that there is a lot of upside still with Kevin Alcantara. I know that our co-host, Brian Smith, has kind of pointed out over on the 1060 West Discord, I think, that Kevin Alcantara, he's not quite that super duper high upside guy that he once was. And I kind of agree with that to a certain degree. But also his floor has been raised because we know that he's a good defender out in the outfield. We know he can be a strong center field defender. He's been a very good center field defender in the minor leagues. I think he can potentially be a great right field defender at the major leagues. I think he can be terrific out there. And that by default, plus the speed, raises his floor. So he really did show the ability to pull the ball in the air quite a bit more in 2024 in the minor leagues. And it still didn't really result in a super high like slugging percentage, super high power numbers. Still good, but I think that there's still some room to grow there for Kevin Alcantara. So he's running out of option years, right? Like I think next year in 2026, the 2026 campaign will be his last option year. So my guess with Kevin Alcantara is he spends the entire year in Iowa this year. if there's some 40-man roster crunches, then you could see him in Chicago because he's already on the 40-man roster. But I think that he will spend most of the year in Iowa, really showing that he can master that level and be prepared for a big league debut, or a big league consistent stay, I guess, in 2026 and beyond. All right, James Triantos is our last guy off the top here of the AAA bats that are worth mentioning. James Triantos is obviously has been taking a back seat over the past couple of years to Matt Shaw, but there's still a lot to like about James Triantos' game, right? The hit tool is obviously elite. He doesn't draw many walks is kind of the thing that scares me about James Triantos, right? Like the on base percentage will have to be buoyed by his ability to get on base with hitting. He'll need to generate hits to generate OBP. And so while the slugging did improve a little bit last year, and the defense and stolen base number, well, the defense improved a decent amount. The stolen base and base running in general improved an incredible amount from James Triantos in 2024. So he's really rounding into a much more complete player. This time last year, I was talking about James Triantos really just being a hit tool only guy. There wasn't much there. I wanted to see more from the speed. I wanted to see more from the power. I wanted to see more from the fielding. I wanted to see more from a ability to draw walks. Well, he didn't draw the walks, but everything else did improve a decent amount at varying levels. So I love that James Triantos is continuing to improve. He will spend most, if not all of the season in 2025 at the AAA level in Iowa. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's fine. If he plays out of this world, then yeah, of course you can call him up to the majors. But right now, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of infield help, infield, outfield kind of utility help with the Cubs right now on the 40-man roster between Ben Cowles and Luis Vasquez and Vidal Brujan and Gage Workman. And so that will start to work, and Miles Mastroboni. Those things will start to work themselves out throughout this offseason and into next year. If we're sitting at a spot where like James Triantos is one of the last men standing in that category, he's a lot different because he's a true, really good top 100 prospect and a guy that's currently not on the 40-man roster. So he's different than those guys. There might be a situation where like going into like July, August of next year of 2025, that James Triantos is one of only two of those handful of guys left in the organization, and maybe he makes his debut in that way in Chicago. Next up, we got Jefferson Rojas, who is the final guy to kind of round out that real top tier, these top 7 prospects in the Cubs organization that can widely be considered top 100 prospects in all of baseball. Jefferson Rojas is a guy who spent last year in South Bend. A lot of things that improved. Like we saw a really, really strong ability from Jefferson Rojas to be able to not swing and miss. He's putting the bat on the ball really well. We saw exit velocity numbers go up last year, and I think he still looked pretty strong defensively at shortstop. He dealt with some injuries last year in 2024, and with the bat, the results didn't really come, right? If you look at his overall numbers, you'd think, why is this guy a top 100 prospect in all of baseball? Why is this guy even a top 7 prospect in the Cubs system? Well, there's still a lot to be molded out of that ball of clay that is Jefferson Rojas. I think that like there's still some the trickiest thing with Rojas for me, the trickiest thing going into 2025 is where the Cubs place him to start off the 2025 campaign. Do they send him back to do they send him back to South Bend? Because that gets really tricky with a top prospect having him repeat a level. That gets a little dicey. That's something we've seen in past years with Ed Howard, or we saw it back in the day with Aramis Ottoman. And I think that's a really good example with Aramis Ottoman, where Aramis Ottoman was jumping up through the system. This was probably 8 years ago now, when the system was really, really poor. He was going up through the system pretty quickly, super, super young. And the Cubs were stuck with a situation where do they continue him up to AA, up to the upper levels of the minors at a super young age? Or do they allow him, even though he's a top prospect in the system, to repeat a level and really prove that he can master that level before getting promoted? Well, with Ottoman, they sent him up to AA, and that proved that he was just not ready for that level, and that seemed to impact him mentally for the rest of his career. Jefferson Rojas, I'm really interested to see how they handle that, right? Does he get the promotion up to AA Tennessee? I think that to start off the year, I would kind of hedge my bets that way because the Cubs have proven, given the amount of run that Jefferson Rojas got in Major League spring training games last year in 2024, I think they have faith in his like mental makeup to perform well and not really take it as too much of a challenge mentally to go up to Double A. So that's going to be interesting. I think that ultimately he spends most of the year in Double A Tennessee next year. It's just a matter of where does he start off the campaign. All right, we got a couple pictures here I want to cover. Jackson Wiggins is the first one, who I think as of right now, Jackson Wiggins is my top prospect in the Cubs, top pitching prospect in the Cubs farm system outside of Cade Horton. He spent last year in between Myrtle Beach and South Bend, where he went on flashes where he looked really, really strong. He also had innings where he looked really, really rough. Jackson Wiggins has really good stuff. The fastball is good. The slider is good. The changeup is good. I think the stuff is like major league quality stuff. He just got to put it all together. He's got to draw the walks down quite a bit, and really start to mold himself and get more athletic on the mound a little bit to show that he has the ability to consistently throw strikes. So I have a lot of optimism about Jackson Wiggins, but he's still got to put a lot together in order to perform well in the upper levels of the minors. I think that Jackson spends most of the year in Double A this year. I think that I would not be surprised if Jackson Wiggins starts the 2025 campaign in South Bend, though. Brandon Birdsell will start the year in the AAA rotation and be ready for a call up to the major leagues whenever that time comes. We've talked plenty about Brandon Birdsell throughout the year. We talked with him this offseason. I'm not going to go into too much detail about Birdie here, but we know his ability to mix together the four-seam fastball, the cutter, the slider into like 12 different pitches is an elite skill that he has. Another elite skill that he has is the ability to consistently throw strikes on the mound. So the stuff improved, the velo improved, the command stayed terrific. Now it's just a matter of, is that stuff good enough to generate whiffs at the big league level? Is he a starter? Is he a reliever in Chicago? I'm not sure, but I think that he will get run in Chicago this year in 2025. Christian Franklin is next up, and I have him ranked significantly higher than what you would expect from a guy who was just not selected in the Rule 5 draft after being left available and off the Cubs 40-man roster this offseason. I have him ranked as, I believe, the 10th best prospect in the Cubs system. Really, with Christian, a lot of the same goes for Christian as Brandon. We talked to him this offseason. We've talked a lot about him during the season. He does a lot of things well. I think he has the single best ability in terms of working good at bats and having a good eye, good plate discipline at the plate. I think he's the best of anybody in the Cubs system at that. The contact ability has improved. The speed is good. He can play all three outfield positions. We just need to see the power. That's all it comes down to with Christian Franklin. I think we see him spend almost the entire season, if not the entire season, in AAA Iowa this year in 2025. All right. Christian Franklin is next. Christian Hernandez. We're going from Christian Franklin to Christian Hernandez, who, man, we're going to get some prospect fatigue with Christian Hernandez. I don't think it's hitting us yet, but right now Christian Hernandez is likely going to spend the entire year at the Double A level. Double A Tennessee is kind of where I expect him. He might start off the season in High A South Bend. I keep saying Double A Tennessee. I got to get used to that, guys. It is now Double A Knoxville. The Smokies have moved from Kodak, Tennessee, as we talked about on the show, over to Knoxville. So they're the Knoxville Smokies. They're the Double A Knoxville Smokies. I expect Christian Hernandez to spend most of the time in Knoxville this year. He might start off in South Bend, but most of the season in Knoxville. And it just seems like he's been in the organization for a long, long time. He's still super young, still just, I believe, at the time of this recording, I believe he's still just 20 years old. And like I've mentioned before, he does a lot of things really well on the field. Defense, base running, his ability to put bat on ball has improved significantly. Right now, my big thing I'm watching out for Christian Hernandez this year in 2025, as he gets up to the upper levels of the system, is how he merges that ability to make contact with the ability to show off some of that batting practice home run power, right? And still merging those two things together in the upper levels is super difficult to do. Owen Casey's a guy that worked really hard and is still continuing to work really hard on that. But he is an elite talent, is Owen Casey. For us to ask that at the upper levels of Christian Hernandez is really tough, but it's something to keep an eye on as he kind of progresses this season. I don't expect to see Christian Hernandez in AAA Iowa this season. I think that we're looking for just a strong, decent, league average performance at the AA level. I think if he did that this year, I would chalk that up as a major success for Christian Hernandez. Let's talk Johnny Long. Let's talk Johnny Long because I think outside of Moises Ballesteros, I don't think anybody in the Cubs farm system got more publicity in 2024 than Jonathan Long. And it was well deserved, right? It's been well documented that he performed well, but not crazy well during his time in high A South Bend, then got bumped up to double A, where he absolutely killed it offensively. He was arguably the best performer offensively in the entire Cubs farm system once he got called up to double A. And then he went down to the Arizona Fall League and continued to hit the cover off the ball down there. Jonathan Long is really interesting, especially given the Matt Mervis trade that just happened and what I just said about Matt Mervis not 20 minutes ago. Jonathan Long is, in my eyes, a first base slash DH prospect. I know that he played some third base. I know that there's been people that have liked him over at third base. I know that he has the potential to play a little bit of corner outfield if need be as well. But I right now am viewing Jonathan Long as a future first base slash DH Major League Baseball player. And so, again, like I said with Matt Mervis earlier, he needs to hit. He's got to continue. What he did in Double A last year, he has to do again this year in Double A and in Triple A. He has to hit at an extreme level while striking out not very much and walking quite a bit. I mean, I believe for a stretch there, maybe over the entire stretch in Double A, he walked more than he struck out. He needs to put up crazy numbers like that in Double A and Triple A next year for him to stay as like a top 10 to 15 prospect in this organization. It gets a little tricky with the Cubs likely graduating guys like Matt Shaw and James Triantos, or Matt Shaw and Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros. But I think that for Johnny Long to be a top 10 quality prospect in this organization, he's going to need to tear the absolute cover off the ball. And so I'm not doubting that he can do that. It's just a matter of like, I need to be proven that he can continue to do that. He needs to continue to kill or show that he can play a real decent third base, which I guess I lean towards expecting him to be able to hit more than I expect him to be able to play third base defensively well. Not just average, but probably well. And so that's just something to keep an eye on with Johnny Long next year. I think he spends most of the year in AAA Iowa. Again, another scenario where he might start off a level lower in AA. He might go back there. But I think that Iowa is where he spends most, if not all of the season in 2025. Let's go from Jonathan Long, who's one type of prospect, to Drew Gray, who is a completely different type of prospect, a former high school draft pick who has shown flashes of being very good the tail end of the 2024 season, along with flashes of being really, really bad the beginning of the 2024 season. So we know that Drew Gray, the velo has just been really weird with sitting in the high 80s to being as high as the mid 90s. The curveball is good, but sometimes can't land it anywhere near the zone. I think the stuff at its peak, when the stuff is really going, the stuff is great. But his big thing is being consistent both with the quality of offerings, the velocity of offerings, and his ability to throw strikes, which right at this point is just non-existent, right? Like he profiles as a reliever because he can't throw strikes. If he can pull that walk rate down to like 10%, 10 to 12, like 10 to 12%, then that would be a major, major win from Drew Gray. And I think then we can start viewing him more as a starting pitcher. He'll continue to be a starting pitcher in 2025 at probably double A Knoxville is where we see him in the 2025 season. But yeah, he's just an interesting case where I think that like somebody mentioned recently about like comparing Drew Gray and how we view him at this age and this level compared to DJ Hers when he was at this age and this level a few years ago. I felt better about DJ Hers pretty significantly, but I think they're cut from the same cloth in terms of like there's a lot of reliever risk. The ability to throw more strikes is super, super important. DJ Hers figured it out to a certain degree and made his debut and logged a lot of innings in the rotation for the Washington Nationals last year. Drew Gray still has a lot of work. I think that like improving upon athleticism this offseason is going to be huge. That's something to keep an eye on going into 2025 is how athletic does he look? How repeatable on the mound does he look? And that's going to go a long ways in like improving that consistency for him on the bump. Let's go to a guy in Alexander Canario who is not a prospect, but still kind of a prospect in terms of the way that we talk about him. He's technically graduated from prospect status but he spent a lot of time last year in AAA. He hasn't gotten significant run in the major leagues, so he's probably worth talking about here in this prospect notes section. Alexander Canario will he is cut. Talk about guys cut from the same cloth. The Nelson Velasquez story. I've been preaching that Alexander Canario and Nelson Velasquez are very similar since the moment Alexander got acquired by the Chicago Cubs. Now, I think that Canario is a little bit better than Nelson Velasquez. I think there's more ability for him to stick on a bad team as a starting player in center field or right field. And I think there's a better chance for Alexander Canario to stick on the bench in Chicago or another good team. But right now, like where his role falls is so wonky, right? Like, is he major league depth? Is he a bench piece? Is he a guy that gets traded? I think it may like for Alexander Canario's purposes, I'm sure that he would work out way better. I'm sure he would appreciate it. I haven't talked with him. I don't know this obviously, but like I'm sure it'd be great for him personally to be on a different team other than Chicago Cubs that have a lot of depth. I mentioned earlier, Owen Casey is that guy that's going to get a long run in the Chicago outfield if there's a long-term injury. Alexander Canario is that guy that's going to get some run if there's a short-term injury. And that's a tough role to play on a major league team. But he's just kind of been dealt a shorter straw, and we're going to have to see how he handles that in 2025 and beyond, whether it's with the Chicago Cubs or in with a different organization. Arian Rodriguez is a guy that spent last year, made it up to South Bend. I think that we see him probably make his way up to Double-A Knoxville in 2025. Another scenario where he might be starting the year in High A South Bend, but I think that it would be kind of shocking in my eyes to see him make his way all the way up to AAA Iowa. I'm expecting most of Arian's innings to come from the Double-A level this year, and I think what I'm looking for with Arian is an increase in whiffs and really just improve stuff across the board. The stuff is good, not great. The results last year were good, not great. I think the fastball velo is decent, but could even tick up a few given his kind of body structure, his ability to add a little bit more muscle over this offseason. I think that like I look at Arian Rodriguez, who's Rule 5 eligible this year, and I see a guy that can just kind of continue to improve, continue to get a little bit better across the board, and that's where some real prospect helium will come from, in addition to what we already saw from him last year in 2024. All right, we'll try churning through these a little bit quicker here because I'm spending more time than I expected on each of these guys. We'll go to Will Sanders. Will Sanders is another guy who made it up to actually he made it all the way up to Double-A Tennessee last year. I expect him to spend most of the season in Double-A Knoxville this year, maybe with a cup of coffee in Triple-A Iowa. Everything I said about Jackson Wiggins is true to a lesser degree with Will Sanders. I really like the stuff. I think the stuff is really strong. But also there are a lot of like inconsistencies with Will Sanders, both in his delivery to the plate and his ability to be consistent in terms of the results on the mound. So some really good flashes from Will Sanders. I'm expecting more. I'm expecting a large improvement from Will Sanders at the Double-A level in 2025. Jack Neely is my top prospect in terms of relievers in the Cubs system, and by a wide margin as well. We saw him debut in Chicago last year. The fastball is pretty damn good. The fastball has good velo, not great shape, but good velo, and the slider is one of the best pitches in the entire Cubs system, Cubs organization as a whole. So those two pitches are he's gonna have to lean on in Chicago, and I think that he probably rides that shuttle between Des Moines and Chicago quite a bit in 2025 until he can kind of really latch on and prove that he can get some high-end innings, right? So like the thing with relievers when they're at this status as Jack Neely is that in order to stick around and not ride that shuttle back and forth between Chicago and Iowa, he'll need to prove that he can log eighth or ninth inning, eighth, seventh, like high octane innings, seventh, eighth, and ninth innings for the Chicago Cubs this year. That's what we saw from Porter Hodge, right? Porter Hodge was going to run that shuttle back and forth had he not proven that he can get shut down innings in the eighth and ninth inning. Neely will have to do that in order to not ride that shuttle. It's perfectly fine to ride the shuttle for a couple of years before like proving that he can stick in the big league bullpen, whether it's the sixth inning or the ninth inning. Let's talk Gage Workman, who was actually haven't had the chance to talk about at all on this podcast. He was acquired in the Rule 5 draft. The Cubs drafted him away to be on the Major League roster in the Rule 5 draft, and he's essentially one of the newest Cubs that we have here. Gage Workman is a really strong defender in the infield. You can play him at third, you can play him at short, you can play him at second base. He has shown the ability to hit for quite a bit of power. When he was drafted back, that was a 2020 draft pick, I believe. When he was drafted out of Arizona State, that was something that he really brought to the table, was his ability to hit for a lot of power and be a strong defender, which is kind of a strong infield defender, which is kind of a unique circumstance. It's not a really common theme with the power defense combination in the infield. He was a former switch hitter. Last year was the first year that he decided to hit only lefty, and his ability to make contact, or his ability to put up numbers against right-handed pitchers, is impressive. Gage Workman, if he makes the Major League roster to start off the 2025 campaign with a Rule 5 draft, he has to spend the entire year in Chicago. The reason why he'll be on the roster is to hit against righties and righties only. He will not see the lineup against left-handed pitchers because his job is to hit righties. Now, the thing to be worried about with Gage Workman is that contact quality, right? He whiffs quite a bit, or not the contact quality, the contact ability. His ability to limit whiffs is not quite there. He was striking out quite a bit. The swing strike rate was pretty high. And so that jump from Double-A, where he was with the Tigers organization, up to the major leagues is going to be a tough one. On the bright side, he can lean on that defense a little bit to work his way into the lineup a little bit more. So Gage Workman is a fun guy to keep an eye on. Not much on Cole Mathis here. I'm going to talk about Cole Mathis because I think that I'm deferring to the Cubs front office's judgment on this pick from this past 2024 campaign. He is now, with Cam Smith gone, the highest draft pick remaining from the 2024 draft. Drafted in the second round, Cole Mathis really kind of profiles as a first baseman, maybe play some third base, maybe play some corner outfield. But Cole Mathis, I'm really excited to see where his power takes off in the 2025 campaign. He is coming back from Tommy John surgery. So that doesn't impact a position player nearly as much as a pitcher, obviously. We should see him in 2025, maybe midseason, maybe a little bit before that. But I'm just really interested to see how he shows off his power. I don't know. We probably see Cole Mathis in the lower levels, Myrtle Beach, South Bend. Don't expect him to get up to the upper levels of the minors this year, but I think splitting his time between Myrtle Beach and South Bend is probably a safe bet. Brody McCullough has long been one of my favorite Cubs pitching prospects since he joined this organization. Right now, I just want to see him healthy. I don't have much else to say. He's missed quite a bit of time over the past couple of years with injuries. I want to see him log innings. I want to show off that ability to really nibble on the edge of the zone for strikes and throw multiple pitches for strikes. I like Brody McCullough. I need Brody McCullough to be healthier in 2025. Pedro Ramirez is hard to lock down. We talked about him on the last podcast. I think that he's an interesting guy where Pedro Ramirez is a guy coaches love, but really not very projectable. I think that he's really strong. I think that he's really strong at the combination of hitting for average, showing off more pop than you'd expect from his size, working good at bats, stealing bases, and being a little bit flexible on defense. But you talk about a 5-tool guy. He doesn't really have any of those 5 tools as plus. He just kind of does everything on the field well. I expect Pedro Ramirez to be a guy that spends a lot of time in this organization where he is organizational depth. I think that he spends a lot of time in AAA. Once he reaches there, this year he'll probably spend most of the season in AA. I think he will live in AAA and get some promotions up to the big leagues and then back down and off the 40-man roster and just kind of bouncing around an organization, whether it's the Cubs or another organization, because I think that coaches seem to love him. I think there's a lot of fun to his game and a lot of grittiness to his game in the way that Matt Shaw is there, but just the tools aren't there as much as you'd like to see from a prospect who's like a top 20-ish, top 25 prospect in an organization. Jose Escobar burst onto the scene last year, put up really strong numbers in the Arizona Complex League, came up to Myrtle Beach last year in 2024, and actually posted the strongest bash score. He bashed the best, according to my metric, of anybody in the Cubs farm system. Now, that was a very, very small sample size for Jose Escobar. He's a second baseman. He's a third baseman a little. I don't know where he plays ultimately. Right now, he's a second baseman. I see a lot of Jonathan Perlaza in Jose Escobar's game. And I think that I'm really excited to see him continue to mash the ball as he climbs the ladder. 2025, I expect to see him back in Myrtle Beach to start off the year and spend most of the season in Myrtle and South Bend. Connor Noland is fun. We had him on the podcast this offseason. Just an incredible story. An incredible outgetter is Connor Noland. And I know that Thomas Nestico is posting minor league baseball StatCast numbers. There, he's posting graphics online. I know he has that over on his Patreon. You can go subscribe to that. But I checked out Connor Noland's StatCast numbers across the board during his time in AAA. Really strong with Connor Noland. I know that he doesn't throw 95. I know like everything's there where like the stuff isn't nasty. The stuff isn't great, but he finds ways to get outs. He finds ways to elicit weak contact from hitters. And I think that Connor Noland is just a really good outgetter. I think that he'll spend the entire year in AAA Iowa this year. I think we might see him as depth for the major league team for the next several years during his time in AAA Iowa. So really like Connor Noland. Really like what he's about. Really excited to see what he comes out in 2025. If he's added more velo, if he's added different stuff, if he's tweaked anything, that's going to be really fun to watch. Luis Martinez Gomez. I was the high guy on Luis Martinez Gomez until our guy Brian Smith came out and ranked him higher than I did. Luis Martinez Gomez was an interesting follow since the day he was drafted. Last year, he made his debut in Myrtle Beach and was super strong. Great, actually, in a very, very, very small sample size. I think it was 2 outings, over 5 innings, I think is what it came out to. And there's just a lot, like, really raw player. But I think that like he's more advanced than most guys at his age. I think that we see Luis Martinez Gomez spend next year in Myrtle Beach and South Bend, not taking a route that's all that different than Arian Rodriguez. I mean, he might just be a year behind what we saw from Arian Rodriguez, which might mean that he jumps up some prospect lists here and there. Nick Dean is fun. Nick Dean was one of the stronger performers in the Cubs farm system last year in terms of numbers and statistically wise. He was really strong. I think that right now he's a starting pitcher. I think ultimately Nick Dean is a nice reliever. I think there's a lot of similarities between Nick Dean and some of the college arms that the Cubs drafted a few years ago. Nick Dean has a strong slider. I think he has a really, really strong changeup. I think he's one of the best changeups in the farm system. And the fastball is decent enough, right? I think it's good enough. I'd like to see him continue to work as a starting pitcher in the 2025 season in Double-A Knoxville. But I think that the transition over to the bullpen is something that might come quicker. And with that, we might see a promotion up to AAA Iowa and then messing around with getting a promotion up to Chicago in 2026. Because I really like the stuff he brings to the table. And I really like how it might work in the bullpen even better than the starting rotation, even though starting is what he's done his entire career, dating back to his time at Maryland in college. Ty Southasine was a draft pick by the Cubs in 2024. He was a draft pick in 2024 who really Ty Southasine is like, I'm trying to figure out how to describe him. He's those qualities that Pedro Ramirez and Matt Shaw bring to the table, where he's just kind of all over the place. He's diving all over the field. He's a baseball rat. But he was also a 4th round draft pick this past season. Ty Southasine is advanced for a high school player. I think that we see him spend most of the year in Low A Myrtle Beach, where most high school draft picks do not debut the following year in Myrtle Beach. And when they do, it's towards the end of the season. I think that we see Ty Southasine get a lot of innings, a lot of at-bats in at Myrtle Beach. And really, I don't know that he's a shortstop long-term. He's probably a second baseman, given the arm strength. But there's a lot to like about Ty Southasine. I think he's going to be a fan favorite as he climbs up through the ladder. Angel Cepeda is a guy that we've heard quite a bit about. We'll talk about Derniche Valdez and his connection to Angel Cepeda in a little bit. But Angel Cepeda, basically since he was signed alongside Derniche Valdez, even though Valdez got a higher contract or a higher signing bonus, Angel Cepeda has been that guy that we've talked about first and foremost from that international free agent signing class. So he's been strong during his time in the Dominican Summer League. He's been strong during his time in Arizona Complex League. I think that he probably starts the 2025 campaign in Myrtle Beach and spends the entire season there. We've seen it be really tough for guys like Christian Hernandez and Alexis Hernandez to jump up from the Arizona Complex League to their full season affiliate in Myrtle Beach. That's worth keeping an eye on. but what Angel Cepeda has done at the plate during his time in the complex leagues has been really, really impressive. Yahil, actually, let's go ahead and go to Derniche Valdez next year. I think that Derniche Valdez got that big signing bonus, and he has been on and off the field quite a bit. He had a couple different stints on the kind of restricted list this past season. It's going to be interesting to watch. Not sure what that was all about exactly. It's going to be interesting to watch Derniche Valdez because the bat has still been pretty decent, not lagging too far behind Angel Cepeda. I think with Derniche, I think they're going to want him to get more at bats in the Arizona Complex League next year. I think that he will be in Myrtle Beach hopefully in 2025, but I think that he won't be up there as soon as Angel Cepeda, or even maybe as soon as Ty Southesine. Yahil Melendez is another guy that is a young infielder. We'll call him a shortstop. I think he's a shortstop as of right now. I said that he's kind of cut from the same cloth when you look at him from Reggie Preciado back in the day, right? He's a tall, lanky shortstop. Hitting lefty, Yahil Melendez has a lot more athleticism than Reggie Preciado ever had. And I think that what Yahil Melendez does well on the field is he just looks like an athlete out there. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. Like he'll hit a gap double, and him running from home to second base just looks beautiful out there. So performed really well with the bat. Performed well defensively according to some reports. I'm curious to see how he performs during his time in Myrtle Beach because that's a big change from the complex league up to Myrtle Beach. Let's go Sam Armstrong next. Sam Armstrong, guys, I'm not getting through these as fast as I thought I was going to be. I have way more queued up, but we'll see how far we get. Sam Armstrong, another guy that made it all the way up to Double-A as a starting pitcher last year. I think that we're going to see a lot of Sam Armstrong going back and forth, kind of like what we've seen from Joe Nahas in recent years, bouncing back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation. Sam Armstrong can eat some innings in that rotation if need be. I'm really impressed by him. I can see Sam Armstrong taking a very similar path to a kind of a poor man's Brandon Birdsell, where you look at them, they're not all that dissimilar in terms of like their body shape and the way that they throw. Obviously, Birdie has that weird arm action. Sam Armstrong does not have that, but a definite outgetter. The stuff is good enough. And I think that like the numbers across the board, if you look at Sam Armstrong's numbers in 2024 compared to Brandon Birdsell's numbers in 2023, super similar across the board, like all the way across the board. So like, we can't expect Sam Armstrong to make a jump in the way that Brandon Birdsell did from year to year, but a jump kind of similar to that would really put him on radars going into 2025. Let's talk Eli Lovich, who's a guy that I really expect to jump way up prospect list this 2025 campaign. I mean, really, like, he's the starter pack to Owen Casey, right? Owen Casey, I've seen some body comps to Christian Yelich. Now, I'm not putting those expectations on a guy who is drafted on day 3 at the draft. But Eli Lovich is tall, lanky. He's got some speed right now, but really it's the power profile. We're keeping an eye on the power profile over the course of 2025 and 2026 and 2027. At that point, like he's a high school draft pick. Like he's still going to be super young at that point. We're seeing how the power continues to develop and play in the full seasons once he reaches there. I think he spends the entire year in the complex league down in Arizona in 2025, but he might get a little bit of action towards the end of the season in Myrtle Beach. Matt Hallback is a guy that was drafted again in 2024. He's actually spending this winter, this offseason, playing down in the Australian Baseball League, which is kind of a fun assignment. It gave me some confidence that the Cubs have. It gave me confidence that the Cubs have confidence in sending Matt Hallback down to Australia to represent them in that deal they have with the Australian Baseball League. So Matt Hallback, probably a first baseman, third baseman, maybe corner outfield, kind of not all that dissimilar to Cole Mathis, but interested like Mathis, interested to see how the power plays, interested to see more importantly how the contact plays now that he enters pro baseball. You guys know how I feel about Brett Bateman. One of my favorites in the entire Cubs farm system. A real profile of a fifth outfielder in the major leagues if he can continue to develop some power. Defense, great. Speed, great. Field a hit, great. He just doesn't have any power. He's got to develop some power, not even over the fence power, just gap to gap power, and that will help him rise. We've had this conversation with so many players in the past. We've had it with Darius Hill, more recent is the most recent examples. We've had it with Ezekiel Pagan. We've had it dating back to like DJ Wilson and Connor Myers and guys like that. They have to show in-game power. They have to do it. Not hitting 10 home runs a season, just hitting something to strike a little bit of fear into the opposing hitter, or sorry, the opposing pitcher, so that he can not throw fastballs down the middle and not be worried that he's not going to take him yard. Because so much of Brett Bateman, where he gets his skill from, is drawing walks and getting on base, and pitchers will not allow him to get on base by walk if he can't hit for power too. So that's just something to keep in mind as he spins the 2025 campaign, starting in Double A. If he performs well, he'll get up to Triple A Iowa. Ariandes Ramon kind of took everybody by storm again last year, performed super, super well in the Complex League, came up, started off really hot in Myrtle Beach, and then cooled off quite a bit after that. He's a Cuban infielder, shortstop, second base, probably a third baseman long term is Ariandes Ramon. I think he spends most of the year in 2025 down in South Bend, and maybe Myrtle Beach is where he might start off. So an older guy for the Myrtle Beach level. He's older than these other guys like Yahil Melendez and Angel Cepeda and Derniche Valdez and guys like that. But in terms of pro baseball experience, definitely not more than those guys. So keep an eye on Ariandes Ramon. He could be a guy that shoots up the system. He could be a guy that really falls out of it by mid-year this year. Kenton Egbert was one of the stronger performers statistically last year on the mound in the entire Cubs farm system. He is likely to spend the entire season this year in Double A Knoxville. And I think that, like Sam Armstrong, he's a guy that might bounce back and forth depending on where he's needed in the rotation and as a starter. And there's a little bit of quirk to Kenton Egbert, right? He has that big Bronson Arroyo leg kick on the mound. And that's something that like he uses that quirkiness and that uniqueness to his advantage because the stuff isn't exactly elite, right? So Kenton Egbert is a guy who's just a fun watch in general. Like if you're going to tune in for, if there's a night where like Cade Horton and Brandon Birdsell and Jackson Wiggins are not throwing, tune in for a Kenton Egbert start because they're really, really fun to watch. BJ Murray Jr. All right. BJ Murray Jr. is what happened last year in 2024 was really unfortunate. I think that what I was scared of happening in terms of like his ability to draw walks, not carrying his offensive profile, and the power not stepping up to the next level, that came to fruition, and it really showed in terms of his overall results. Again, you look at the minor league StatCast numbers, not pretty, a whole lot of blue across the board for BJ Murray. But really, I think there was a little bit of bad luck in watching his at bats last year. Now, I'm not expecting him to bounce back into a top 15 prospect in the organization, but I think that I'm keeping him in my top 40 right now because I think there's still something there with BJ Murray. I'm excited to see him spend the entire year, hopefully, in AAA Iowa. I don't want to see him back in AA this year. I want him to spend the entire year in AAA Iowa. Another guy who's been in the organization for quite some time, Pablo Aliendo, is at this point, he's going to be in AAA Iowa next year, I'm expecting, in 2025. And he's a little bit of major league depth, right? The Cubs have Miguel Amaya and Carson Kelly at the major league level. They have Moises Ballesteros in AAA. Who knows how the Cubs think of him behind the plate? They just signed Carlos Perez behind the plate this offseason to be a little bit of major league depth as a veteran player. I think Pablo Aliendo has an off chance of getting some major league reps this season as a third, fourth, fifth type catcher during his time in AAA Iowa. So I'm excited. Pablo Aliendo is a super fun player. The arm is decent. The receiving skills are good. The blocking is rough, I think, back there. The power is great. The width is rough. So all over the place with Pablo Aliendo. I'm excited to see what he does in 2025. Luis Vasquez, another guy who's not really a prospect anymore, but I want to talk about him here, given the fact that he's still going to spend some time in AAA Iowa. He's still got options, so he can still be there down there in AAA Iowa. Still a great defender at shortstop. You're hoping for a league average bat with Luis Vasquez. I really like him a whole lot. I'm curious to see how he fits into that mix of a whole bunch of infielders on the 40-man roster. He's at times fighting for his 40-man roster spot, and he'll need to hit above league average in AAA in order to hold on to that. You guys know how I feel about Riley Martin. Unique fastball, elite curveball, a lot of strikeouts, a lot of walks, Really impressive down the stretch for Iowa last year. Go listen to our interview with him this offseason if you want to know more about Riley Martin. But a guy that will spend most of the year, if not all the year, in AAA Iowa this year, and probably get up to Major League for a cup of coffee here and there at that throughout the season. Michael Arias is a guy that when I put out on Twitter that I'm going to be doing this, people were asking about Arias and talking about how he kind of fell off in terms of like we're not talking about him as much. I think part of that is that he just performed really, really poorly last year in 2024. He's a reliever that got advanced up to AAA very quickly. And really with Michael Arias, like the stuff seems good, but it's just not getting results. And he's already in the 40-man roster. Super tricky situation. I'm curious to see him come back in 2025 with like a fresh start in Iowa and be like, hey, like you are here. You are assigned to AAA Iowa. Let's see what you can do. Let's see that change up. Let's hopefully see an improved slider and get more whiffs across the board. We'll see how Michael Arias does. Frankie Scalzo Jr. is the opposite side of this, right? We need to see more whiffs from Frankie. Like if he's going to be a back end reliever in Iowa, if he's going to be a reliever option in Chicago, he's got to get more whiffs. He gets results, but he just doesn't get as many whiffs with that fastball and the slider. If those come, then for sure, that's something that can happen over an offseason is he can really improve the bite on the slider or the velo on the fastball to really generate more whiffs with those pitches. If he can do that, then he's a major league reliever. If he can't, he'll be down in AAA. He'll be that's another guy super fun to watch going into next year. All right, I believe that was my top 40 of my rankings. I'm gonna see if I can rapid fire. I'm talking rapid fire. I have a lot more guys here. I've just hit the hour long mark, and I don't have a whole. I'm gonna be honest. I don't have a whole lot of time to do this. So we're gonna outside the top 40. I'm just gonna churn through some of these dudes real fast. All right. Ivan Brennen was a draft pick in 2024. Insane power. Performed not very well during his brief stint in Myrtle Beach in 2024. He'll be probably back in Myrtle in 2025, maybe up to South Bend, and really showcasing. Can he showcase that power while continuing to hit for average at a decent rate as he kind of climbs through the system? Ronnie Cruz is probably got snubbed for my top 40, to be completely honest with you. Drafted just above Ty Southesine in the draft in 2024. He is another high school draft pick. Super toolsy. I don't expect to see him in Myrtle Beach as quickly as Ty Southesine, maybe the back end of 2025. I'm curious to see if the Cubs stick with him at shortstop or if he becomes a center fielder, second baseman, where he moves to. But Ronnie Cruz is just, there's a lot still to be determined about Ronnie Cruz in the next 5 years. Ben Cowles, 40-man roster. I've already mentioned him a few different times here. From the moment he was added to the 40-man roster this offseason until he can prove that he's a major league player, he's going to be fighting for his 40-man roster spot. I think there's a lot of value. He was acquired last year as a part of the Mark Leiter Jr. trade alongside Jack Neely. There's value in an ability to play multiple positions, including shortstop. Defense is fairly strong across the board. Ability to make contact, but no tools really stand out in a crazy way for Ben Cowles. Fernando Cruz deserves a mention here. I typically don't rank. The reason I'm not ranking Fernando Cruz is because he is not stateside yet. Like, he hasn't performed stateside, and that really worries me in terms of ranking guys. I would view him not all that much differently than Angel Cepeda or Derniche Valdez or any of those teenage shortstops at this point. So much still left to see about Fernando Cruz. I'd love for him to kill it. I'd love for him to kill it and perform better than we saw from Christian Hernandez coming up to the system. We'll have to see with Fernando Cruz. Juan Bello Spence last year. I expect to see him this year in South Bend most of the season. The fastball is not electric enough. The stuff in general is not electric enough, but he did get good results from time to time. If he sees an uptick in stuff from sitting around 90 to sitting around like 93, 94, that's going to be important. Keep an eye on Juan Bello. I think it's just kind of keep an eye on him in South Bend this year. Cole Franklin, we know Cole Franklin. He's been in the organization a long time. He's been on the show several times. He will be healthy going into 2025. He will be in Iowa in 2025. He will be a starter or a reliever. I'm not entirely sure, but excited to see how he bounces back from injury and see if he can kind of force the issue up to Chicago. I know he came back on a successor contract this year over the offseason to return to Chicago when he could have gone elsewhere. He decided to return back to Chicago. I'm excited to see how that pans out for him. Naz Muley is a guy that performed well, like decent during his first taste as a full-time starting pitcher at the full season level last year in 2024. Just not nearly enough swing and miss, which is really weird, right? Like he was not getting any swings and misses last year, which is not what I expected from a guy who brings some heat really on the mound. A little all over the place with command, but just no swings and misses. That'll need to improve, obviously, next year in 2025, probably back in Myrtle Beach. Felix Stevens has I'd argue Stevens has the best raw power in the entire organization. Just a huge human being. I think he's good at first base defensively. He can play a little bit of corner outfield. Strikes out just far too much. He'll be in Double A this year. I'd love to see him force his way up to Triple A. Just a big time through three true outcomes guy is Felix Stevens. Leo Espinoza he spent last year in Myrtle Beach. He's one of my favorite guys. He's a really strong performer in terms of my bash metric last year in Myrtle Beach. I think that he will spend this year in South Bend, maybe get a taste of Double A Tennessee. Jury's still out on this center fielder. I think that he brings a lot in terms of he looks like a leadoff play. Like he fits a top of order. He fits in center field. I like Leo Espinoza quite a bit. Still to be determined on like where he falls in terms of a prospect list. I need to see a little bit more performance or a little bit like flashier tools from Leo Espinoza in 2025. Luis Rujano, again with a guy who needs to generate more whiffs. We've seen that throughout his entire career with the Cubs. Still a guy to keep an eye on because I still like what he brings to the table in terms of his pitch mix and in terms of how he looks on the mound. Hayden McGarry fell off last year. Just a really poor performance across the board offensively for Hayden McGarry. In 2023, he was a guy that hit the ball super, super hard, but hit it on the ground a lot. I think the power is still there given his size and given his ability to hit the ball at extreme exit velos. I don't know what went wrong last year in terms of him hitting sub 200, in terms of him offensively being a black hole in a lineup that was pretty good last year in Tennessee. So I still believe in him in terms of like really turning things around. Maybe he's not a top 20 prospect in this organization, but I think he can still work his way up from Double A up to Triple A this year in 2025. Nico Zeglin was probably the best statistically wise, best guy in the entire organization last year on the mound for the Cubs. Just put up great numbers in Low A Myrtle Beach, put up even better numbers in High A South Bend. This year we'll see him in Double A Tennessee, Double A Knoxville, bouncing back and forth between the rotation and the bullpen. And we'll see if he kind of can hang with those guys at the upper levels of the minors. Zach Lee. Zach Lee is a reliever. He'll spend a year probably in AAA Iowa. I want to see an improvement on the stuff. On the stuff, because the stuff was really good in the first few years, and the results were not as much, and the age was not. Now he's an older guy. I need to see the stuff return. I'm not ruling out a future major league career from Zach Lee, but he's going to need to perform both in terms of the stuff that he brings to the mound and the results that he gets out there. Edgar Alvarez was a draft pick in 2024. Big first baseman DH, only a first baseman and DH. He will play in no other position. He will probably spend this year in South Bend and in Knoxville. How much can this guy rake? Jury's still out. We'll have to see, but I'm curious to watch him take at bats. But he's a big dude with big power. How does that translate from college at Nicholls State to the pros for the Chicago Cubs? Matt Thompson, 8 innings last year in Double A. He 8 innings. He was a return for Bailey Horn from the White Sox going into the last season. Ate a lot of innings. Didn't perform super, super well. I think we see him back in Double A this year, maybe in Triple A. We might see him there. Christian Olivo is one of my favorite defensive players to watch. I think he's good in the outfield. I think he's great in the infield. He's just a fun utility player. If he can hit a little bit, he'll continue to be in the organization for a long, long time. He'll spend this season bouncing all around. I expect him to be in South Bend, in Tennessee, and Iowa, maybe filling in Myrtle Beach. I expect him to be all up and down the system this year, filling in as needed, given that defensive flexibility that he has. Andy Garriola is a guy that I could see following a little bit of a Matt Mervis path. I don't know, nothing crazy, like not crazy like that, but like performed well enough in Myrtle Beach. He's got light tower power, performed even better during his time in South Bend once he made it up there. He's a left fielder. He's not a center fielder or right fielder. I think he's a left fielder. He's got a lot of power. He walked more when he reached South Bend. but just a fun player to watch in general. He's a guy you can get behind at the very least. Chase Strumpf, I gotta bring Chase Strumpf into this. I gotta do it. We know what Chase Strumpf is: high strikeouts, good power, good enough at second base and third base. He is a minor league Patrick Wisdom. Let's see if he can potentially become a major league Patrick Wisdom. Nick Hole is. I talked about Nick Dean earlier. I think that Nick Hole is similar in a lot of ways. I really like Nick Hole in the bullpen. He converted there last year in Tennessee, and I really liked what he brought to the table in the bullpen. I think that he goes back to Knoxville this year. I think he stays in the bullpen and tries to work his way up to AAA Iowa. Casey Opitz is the best defensive catcher in the Cubs organization. That includes Miggy Amaya and Carson Kelly at the major league level. Casey Opitz is the best defensive catcher the Cubs have. He hasn't hit worth a lick. He'll need to hit something in order to continue to climb the ladder. He'll be probably in AA and AAA next year, bounce around wherever he's needed. If he can hit it all, like he'll be a major leaguer for a few innings here or there. But right now he just can't hit well enough to make it up there. Cameron Cisneros is Edgar Alvarez, but different. Like his 2024 draft pick. He went in the later rounds of the draft. Big boy at first base, only playing first base in DH. Struggled a little bit during his time in Myrtle Beach last year. I think he probably goes back to Myrtle Beach, maybe South Bend. Would be shocked if he makes it up to AA Tennessee, AA Knoxville next year. But worth keeping an eye on Cameron Cisneros because he's a big boy and it's fun rooting for big boys. All right. Hayden Cantrell was a minor league Rule 5 draft pick last year. He performed really well in AA and AAA last year. I like what Hayden Cantrell brings to the table, playing some second base, shortstop, third base, center field, right field, left field, even like a true utility guy. Unlike the other 5-6 guys that I've mentioned earlier in terms of that role. Obviously, Hayden Cantrell not on the 40-man roster. He'll be fun to watch as he spends most of the year in AAA Iowa this year. Also is a fun YouTube channel, so go check that out. Ethan Hearn kind of popped for a few weeks there last year in 2024. Obviously, a former for a day 2 draft pick out of high school as a catcher. Could be a late bloomer, could be nothing this year. We'll have to keep an eye on Ethan Hearn because of that kind of extra little special thing he threw in midseason last year in terms of showing off offensively. All right. Ariel Armis was a draft pick in 2024, catcher, along with our guy Owen Ayers, who was the 20th round draft pick last year. These two catchers will likely spend the year in South Bend, would be my guess. And Ariel Armis is a real defensive guy. Anything we get offensively from him will be a plus. And Owen Ayers is a real good athlete back behind the plate. Curious to see kind of where he lands. Carter Trice is a former infielder, turned catcher convert, turned back to first baseman because he was showing off offensively a little bit with the bat. Like to see if that power is legit during his time in South Bend this year. But I think there's a little bit of pop in that bat for sure. I mentioned Darius Hill earlier. He'll spend the year in AAA Iowa. He's been in the organization for an awful long time. He is a bat first guy and a contact first guy and really a contact only guy. He will need to hit 330 in AAA to make his MLB debut. I will be curious to see if he gets any type of consistent playing time during his time this year. Shane Marshall was the closer for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans last year. We've seen from closers in Myrtle Beach, they've had a tough time, albeit not awful time, as they climb the ladder up to South Bend in Tennessee. Shane Marshall is that he was a catcher in college. He was the guy that he was a catcher at Georgia. He came in for like mop-up duty to throw like 2 innings in his college career. During that time, there was a Cubs scout there. They liked what they saw from the metrics from Shane Marshall. Said, hey, you're a pitcher now. And he threw last year in Myrtle Beach and performed pretty well. The under the hood numbers weren't beautiful from Shane Marshall, but I think that he's a fun prospect given he's an older college guy, but brand new to pitching. Alexis Hernandez, like Christian Hernandez, had a really rough first season in Myrtle Beach, although Alexis was even rougher than what we saw from Christian Hernandez. He'll need to turn around. I think it was an OPS around 500 over the course of the season last year. He'll need to turn around pretty significantly in order to show out and during his time in Myrtle Beach next year in 2025 as well. All right, 2 more guys here, guys. One is Brian Calmer. Brian Calmer was being talked about in the same breath as Jonathan Long entering the 2024 season. Obviously, Johnny Long took off and Brian Colmer went down. Really poor performance from Brian Colmer offensively last year. Showed flashes from time to time. I think that he's ultimately a first baseman long term. He'll spend next season in 2025 between South Bend and Tennessee, probably. But because he was once talked about in the same breath as Johnny Long, he's worth mentioning here. All right, guys. Last guy I'm talking about here is Ed Howard, who didn't make his way up to AAA Iowa as kind of a reward for a strong season in South Bend defensively and at times offensively last year. He'll probably spend the year in AA Knoxville. I would expect him to be there this year. And he is no longer the first round. I mean, he's a first round draft pick, but he's no longer that pedigree that he once was. I don't expect him to make his major league debut. I don't expect him to make it up there, but I think that his ability to stick in the organization and be just a good teammate across the board is going to be really important. I've heard nothing but good things about Ed Howard during his time in the Cubs organization, despite dealing with injuries and poor play over the course of that time. He's kept his head up, been a great teammate. And I think that at this point, we have to kind of take Ed Howard for what he is and enjoy the type of person he is, in addition to his effort to come back and perform as well as he can. So, all right, guys, I don't know how many players that was. I think that was pushing 70 players. I'll go back and count it up. But sorry if this didn't come across on podcast and YouTube as well as I had hopes. Hopefully, I was able to give you guys a little bit of information on a lot of different players in the organization, so you can take that and go tweet it out and say how much of an idiot I am. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to the YouTube. Give us a like down below. We'd really, really appreciate it if you gave us a like. Give us a comment. Who did I miss? Is there anybody that you guys wanted me to talk about? I'll comment about them in the comments. If there's anybody else you want me to mention, let me know. Thank you guys. Subscribe over on YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify, and all that good stuff. You can find me on Twitter at Out of the Vines, over on Blue Sky as well, and over on Tid 60 West Discord channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears in 2 short weeks. Take care, guys.